Some women chase luxury, others clean up after it. And then, there's the woman luxury could never forget. Have you ever watched someone fall in love with you? Silently. Have you ever loved someone so deeply, but never dared to say it out loud? Bronzeville didn't raise soft women. Jalaiah Monroe walked into the Wexley estate at 22, wearing second-hand flats and a blouse she'd pressed 5 times. No designer labels, no resume filled with elite referrals, just experience, discipline, and an old-school kind of dignity her grandmother drilled into her soul. She didn't know whose house it was. Not at first. All she knew was the rooms never ended, and the silence wasn't peaceful. It was sharp. She was shown to the back entrance by a house manager who didn't bother remembering her name. She was instructed never to speak unless spoken to, and never, under any circumstance, to make eye contact with Mr. Silas Wexley. No problem. Jalaiah had grown up invisible. She could keep it that way. The job wasn't glamorous. Scrubbing baseboards in a billionaire's home didn't change your reality. But it paid, and she needed that. Her dreams of becoming a chef were on hold after her grandmother's stroke swallowed her savings. She didn't complain. That wasn't her style. But what Jalaiah didn't know, what no one expected, was how quiet dignity can echo louder than diamonds in the right man's heart. And that man was Silas. The first time she saw him, it was only a glimpse. He walked through the west hallway, surrounded by his board members and assistants, tall, sharp-featured, with a walk like he'd never been denied anything. Jalaiah looked away before he could notice her, but he did. He always noticed everything. You cooked this? 3 weeks in, Jalaiah was scrubbing counters in the chef's kitchen long after the rest of the staff had cleared out. A filet mignon, medium rare, untouched, sat on the warming tray. Mr. Wexley had cancelled dinner mid-meeting and stormed off, as usual. No one dared touch it. But Jalaiah hated waste. She didn't think anyone would mind if she heated it up and ate quietly in the back prep room. She added garlic, a bit of butter, nothing fancy. She'd just taken the first bite when a voice echoed from behind her. You cooked this? She nearly dropped the fork. Her heart sprinted. He stood there, alone, no entourage, just watching her. She stammered, "No, sir, I just finished it." He took a few steps closer, lifted the fork from her plate and took a bite. Chewed, swallowed. "It's better," then walked out. That was it. No reprimand, no raised voice, just a comment. But it was the first time Silas Wexley had spoken to her directly, and Jalaiah didn't sleep well that night, not out of fear but because something in her shifted. From then on, it became a series of almosts. Almost smiles when they passed in the hallway, almost conversations when their eyes met across the dining room, almost touches when she handed him a towel during his workouts, almost feelings she tried to bury deep, deep down. But the truth is, he noticed her. He liked that she didn't try to impress him. He liked that she didn't throw her presence around like perfume. He liked that when others stared, she looked away. "You're different." That was what he finally said one night. She had stayed late to polish glassware. He'd come in alone, loosened tie, a scotch in hand. "I'm just here to work," she said softly, not looking at him. Silas stepped closer. "No, you're different," he repeated. The room pulsed with silence. The air thickened. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. That night was the first time his hand brushed her waist. The first time he stayed behind after his meetings. The first time he watched her move instead of looking through her. They never called it love, never called it anything, and maybe that's where the mistake began. But here's what love sometimes looks like. It looks like a billionaire pausing to watch a maid slice apples for a fruit tray. It sounds like 2 voices laughing softly in a kitchen meant for silence. It feels like fingertips brushing in the dark behind pantry doors. No promises, no titles, just presence. Jalaiah never asked him for anything. Not money, not attention, not even acknowledgement. But in her heart, she started to hope. Hope that maybe, in the quietest of ways, she meant something. Hope that maybe his touches weren't just boredom in silk clothing. Hope that maybe he'd see her, not as a maid, but as herself, and for a while, it felt like maybe he did. Until one day, everything changed. She hadn't meant to stay late that evening. The rest of the staff had already clocked out, and the estate was eerily quiet. Most of the house lights were dimmed, except for a soft glow from the hallway sconces. Jalaiah was in the West Wing kitchen again, tidying up what the chef's assistant had ignored. She'd gotten used to doing more than asked, not because she wanted praise, but because doing things right felt like the only thing she had control over. She didn't notice he was already there. Silas stood by the marble countertop, alone, sleeves rolled up, no blazer. His watch was off. His gaze was direct. "You're always here late," he said. Jalaiah froze, then straightened. Someone has to make sure the place doesn't fall apart between staff shifts. His lips curved slightly. "You don't talk like the others." "I'm not like the others." Her voice surprised even her. It wasn't flirty. It wasn't meek. It was true. Silas moved closer, slowly. "You're bold." "I'm honest." That was when everything started. There were no fireworks, no sudden embrace, just closeness, tension, energy so thick it was almost visible. He reached over, plucked a grape from the tray she had prepared, and stood too close while he ate it. She could smell his cologne, dark, expensive, cold. "You're beautiful," he murmured. That was the first compliment. The first lie, maybe, or the first truth that scared her. She didn't respond. She should have left. She knew that. But his presence had gravity, and Jalaiah, though rooted in common sense, was still human. The first time it happened, it was after a storm. She had come in soaked. The rain had caught her on her walk from the train station. Silas was home early. He saw her in the foyer, dripping onto the tiles. She apologized. He handed her a towel. The touch lingered, and then they kissed. No one else was home. That night, they didn't talk much, just touches, lips, soft gasps in shadowed corners. Jalaiah had never known what it meant to be wanted and unseen at the same time. Silas didn't promise her anything. He didn't even say her name during those moments. But he kept coming back. For 2 months, it continued. Midnights in the laundry room, locked pantry doors, long stares across the dinner table when the room was full of people who would never guess. To the outside world, she was still just the maid. But to him, she wanted to believe she was more. Jalaiah didn't have girlfriends to talk to about it. No one who would understand. Her aunt would have slapped her with a Bible. Her grandmother, God rest her soul, would have called her a fool. So Jalaiah kept it inside, until the day she felt sick during breakfast prep. 3 days in a row. She bought a test on her lunch break, took it in the staff restroom. Positive. She stared at the pink lines in silence. A baby. His baby. Her hand trembled as she held the test. Not out of fear, but out of disbelief. This wasn't part of the plan. She thought about keeping it from him. Forever. But something in her couldn't. Maybe it was her sense of fairness. Maybe it was the way her grandmother had raised her. Or maybe, deep down, she still believed he cared, at least a little. She waited until a Thursday evening when he was alone in his office. He looked up when she knocked. "You never knock," he said. "I need to talk to you." He paused, closed his laptop. "Okay." She stepped in, shut the door. "I'm pregnant." Silence. Longer than it should have been. Then, "You're sure it's mine?" Not angry, not confused. Just cold, detached, like he was reading the weather forecast. Jalaiah blinked. "I haven't been with anyone else," she whispered. Silas stood, paced once, then rubbed his chin. "I'll take care of it. Whatever you need." She stared at him. "You think this is about money?" "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." The air cracked between them. The walls that had once held soft secrets now stood heavy and judgmental. "I don't want your money," she said. "What do you want, Jalaiah?" She swallowed hard. "I wanted you to care." She left that night, didn't pack her things, didn't tell the house manager. She simply walked away from the mansion, and the man who couldn't even claim what he helped create. She was 5 months along. She didn't cry until she reached the train station. Even then, she did it quietly, like everything else in her life. A week later, she received a bank transfer, more money than she'd ever seen. No note, no call, no name attached. She deleted the alert and never touched it. To her, that account didn't exist. What existed was the child growing inside her, the rent she couldn't afford, and the steady hands of her aunt, who never said "I told you so" when she moved back into the old apartment on the south side. She gave birth in the middle of a thunderstorm. The lights flickered in the hospital. The name she chose? Cairo. It meant victorious one. He came out with a full head of hair and eyes the color of burnt hazel, so much like Silas's it hurt to look at him. She held him close, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "You'll never feel unwanted. Not even once." For the next 7 years, she kept that promise. Jalaiah took on 2 jobs, waitressing during the day, catering on weekends. When Cairo turned 5, she got hired as a kitchen assistant at Booker Elementary. It was steady work and kept her close to him. She never spoke of Silas, never showed Cairo a photo, never fed him stories about a dad who couldn't love them both enough to stay. She didn't have time for bitterness. Bitterness doesn't raise babies. Work does. Love does. Every time Cairo smiled, she found healing. Every time he asked why he didn't have a dad, she gave him the truth. Some people aren't ready when they should be. She kept her silence, not because she was ashamed, but because she refused to beg. It was supposed to stay simple. Jalaiah was a maid. He was the boss. Lines weren't meant to blur. Boundaries were supposed to protect people like her, working class, careful, and raised, to believe that the world didn't hand out second chances to girls from the south side. But Silas made it hard to remember the rules. He was distant, sure, always buried in meetings, strategy calls, or black car SUV drop-offs. But when it came to her, he had this way of looking, focused, quiet, unreadable. And every time their paths crossed, it was like the air changed. It started with small things, a light hand on her back as he passed, lingering eye contact during dinner prep. Once, he'd reached for a glass at the same time as her. Their fingers touched. Neither moved. She should have let go first. She didn't. One Thursday evening, late again, she stayed behind to reset the pantry shelves. The chef had been in a rush that day and left it chaotic. Jalaiah didn't mind. Quiet spaces helped her think. She didn't hear Silas come in, but she felt him. His footsteps weren't loud, but the space seemed to notice him. "Didn't expect anyone still working," he said behind her. She turned slowly. Her heart always jumped before her mouth could move. "I'm just putting things back the way they should be." He nodded, but didn't leave. "Why don't you ever ask for help?" he asked, stepping into the pantry. She blinked. "Help? You do more than you're paid for. No complaints, no shortcuts. I don't see a reason to do something halfway." He stood beside her, closer than usual. "You always this principled?" Just raised right. His hand brushed hers again, deliberate this time. Still, Jalaiah hesitated. "You're going to get me in trouble," she said quietly. "I already feel like I'm in it," he replied. That night, they kissed again. No shadows this time, no darkness to hide behind, just shelves of expensive ingredients and 2 people who had no business falling into each other's arms. The affair didn't have rules, but it had routines. Late nights, empty rooms, whispered names, long pauses when their fingers touched. They didn't talk about what it meant. Jalaiah didn't ask for more, and Silas didn't offer clarity. But sometimes the way he touched her face, the way he lingered at her door, made her believe it was something more than a secret. She cooked for him, not his official meals, just little things. Roasted vegetables, baked cornbread, pasta on his rough days. He never said thank you with words, but he always finished everything. One night, she brought him soup when he had a migraine. He didn't speak, just pulled her down onto the couch beside him, resting his head in her lap. They didn't kiss, didn't talk, just sat there, her hands in his hair, his breathing steadying. It was the most intimate thing they'd shared, but intimacy, without clarity, turns heavy. Jalaya began to feel it in her chest, a weight, the sneaking around, the no strings but heart-tied closeness, the way the other staff looked at her like they knew but wouldn't dare say it. She hated secrets, especially when they didn't feel like hers to carry. One Saturday afternoon, Silas had flown out to San Francisco for a tech expo. The house was quiet for the weekend. Jalaya had the day off. She spent it with her aunt, helping her sort through bills. They had barely enough to cover electricity. Jalaya wanted to help, but her own savings were low. Her chef's school tuition was still unpaid. The job at the estate paid better than any other she could get without a degree, but it wasn't enough to support 2 households. "You're working too hard," her aunt muttered. "I don't have a choice." "Are you seeing someone?" Jalaya's spoon paused mid-stir. "What makes you ask that? You got that look on your face, the one your mother used to have when she was young and confused." "I'm not confused," Jalaya said. But she was. Silas returned Monday. He came in late, looking exhausted. His driver dropped him at the front. The staff buzzed around, ready to cater to him. Jalaya kept her distance. She told herself it was smart, protective. He texted her that night. "You didn't say hi." She stared at the message, typed, deleted, typed again, then sent, didn't think it mattered. His reply came fast, "It does." To me. 3 days later, she missed her period. She wasn't panicked at first. Stress happened. Her schedule was a mess. Her meals weren't consistent. Delays were normal. But when day 28 passed, then day 31, she bought the test quietly at a pharmacy across town. She didn't even wait to get home. She took it in the bathroom at a library. 2 pink lines. Positive. She sat on the closed toilet lid, the stick in her hand, her breath shallow. Silas's child. Their child. She pressed a palm to her belly, as if trying to connect with what was now real. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just breathed. Telling him was never going to be easy, but she believed somehow that it mattered to do it face to face, that she owed the truth, not because he'd been good to her, but because her child deserved to be acknowledged. So she waited until his meetings cleared, waited until it was just him in his home office, leaning back in his leather chair, sipping scotch and reviewing contracts on a giant screen. He looked up when she knocked. "Come in." She stepped inside, closed the door. Her hands were shaking. "I have something to tell you." He turned his chair slightly, waiting. "I'm pregnant." Pause. Silence. He blinked. "You're sure it's mine?" Jalaya's body stiffened. His tone wasn't angry. It wasn't even surprised. It was clinical. A man solving a problem, not feeling a revelation. Her stomach turned. "I haven't been with anyone else." Another long pause. He stood, walked toward the window. Back turned to her. "I can arrange support. Whatever you need. Doctors, housing. I'm not asking for money." He turned then, confused, defensive. "Then what do you want, Jalaya?" She looked at him for a long time, and then answered honestly. "I wanted you to care." He didn't say a word after that. Didn't stop her when she walked out. Didn't call. Didn't chase. That night, she packed, left the staff quarters, took the train home, hand on her stomach the whole way. She didn't know what kind of mother she'd be, but she knew this. Her child wouldn't have to live in silence. Even if she had to, Jalaya never looked back. The morning after she left the Wexley estate, the city felt colder. The hum of the train, the chatter of strangers, even the wind cutting. Through her coat, it all sounded distant, like someone else's life. Her bags weren't heavy, but her heart was. He hadn't called. He hadn't stopped her. And somehow, that silence was the final answer she hadn't known she was waiting for. She moved back into her aunt's apartment on 71st and Ellis, a second-floor walk-up with thin walls and a window that wouldn't close all the way. Her old room was still there, dusty but untouched. Her aunt, always unbothered by drama, simply hugged her and said, "You're safe." That's what matters. Jalaiah unpacked in silence. She folded her maid uniform and stuffed it in the back of a drawer, not because she planned to return, but because she hadn't yet figured out what came next. The job was gone. The stability, gone. The fantasy, gone. All she had now was herself, and the child growing inside her. Her pregnancy wasn't easy, not physically, not emotionally. She had no doctor at first, just walk-in clinics with long waits and nurses who rarely smiled. Her savings dwindled, fast. She started working at a local diner under the table. The manager didn't ask about her bump as long as she showed up on time and cleaned faster than anyone else. She took whatever shifts she could get, late nights, early mornings, double shifts when her ankles were swollen. She never complained. She wouldn't give Silas the satisfaction of seeing her break, not after the way he looked at her in that office. "You're sure it's mine?" That sentence replayed in her head at night like a cruel lullaby. She never told her aunt the full story, only that the father wasn't in the picture and wouldn't be. Cairo was born on a rainy Sunday in March. The storm knocked out part of the city's power grid. Her aunt barely got her to the hospital in time. Jalaiah didn't scream during labor. She grit her teeth, gripped the bed rails, and pushed through the pain the way she'd pushed through everything else in life, quietly determined. When the doctor placed the baby in her arms, she didn't cry. She stared at him. He had a full head of dark, thick curls, and when his eyes finally opened, hazel, warm, bright, unmistakable hazel. Her breath caught in her throat. She'd spent months preparing herself to forget Silas. But her son was a mirror, not just in color, in intensity, in presence. Cairo looked up at her like he was already aware of the world he'd been born into. She kissed his forehead and whispered, "You are not a mistake. You are my reason." She named him Cairo because it meant victorious one, and from the very first breath, that's what he was. The first year was a blur. Jalaiah juggled nursing shifts with late-night bottle feedings. Her aunt helped when she could, but arthritis slowed her down. They took turns rocking Cairo when he had colic. Nights bled into mornings. Sleep became a stranger. But Jalaiah never faltered. She never once checked the news for Silas's name. She blocked his company's updates on social media. She refused to Google him. If he wasn't going to be present for their son, he didn't deserve to be in her head either. But sometimes, in the quietest hours, she'd see Cairo smile, sideways, smug, and it would gut her, because that was his smile, the one he wore when he knew he had the upper hand in a room. Her son had inherited that, and no matter how far she tried to run, she couldn't deny what was in his blood. When Cairo turned 2, Jalaiah found steady work at a local community center kitchen. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid enough to keep diapers stocked and the lights on. By the time he was 4, she was leading cooking classes for single mothers and teens. The center director, Miss Delphine, adored her. "You've got a calm about you," she said once. "But your eyes, they've seen things." Jalaiah didn't explain. She didn't need to. At 5, Cairo started kindergarten. He was the youngest in the class, but the tallest. Teachers said he was quiet but observant, always watching, always thinking. He didn't cause trouble, but he didn't trust easily either. "Your son has walls," one teacher noted. Jalaiah smiled. "He gets that from me." But she knew better. Cairo got his temper from Silas. His smirk, his posture. Once, during a parent-teacher meeting, she caught him frowning at a boy who had taken his crayons. The way he crossed his arms, leaned back, and stared the other kid down. Pure Wexley. She turned away before the tears came. Silas never reached out. No letters, no calls, no visits. But she wasn't surprised. He'd made his choice in that office, and she'd accepted it. The silence after that wasn't betrayal. It was confirmation. Still, something inside her held the memory of who he could have been. The man who sat in her kitchen, eating her soup like it mattered. The man who let her hold him during his migraine. the man who once kissed her like she was the only real thing in his overbuilt world. She held that version in a quiet part of her heart, not because she loved him still, but because she had to forgive herself for loving him at all. By the time Cairo turned 7, life had settled into a rhythm. He was thriving at Booker Elementary. Jalaiah, now head of the cafeteria staff, had earned the respect of teachers, students, and parents. Her kitchen ran efficiently. Kids ate better. Teachers dropped by for her meatloaf recipe. She felt whole, not rich, not famous, but whole, until one Monday morning changed everything. The principal gathered staff for an announcement during prep hour. "We're welcoming a special guest today," he said. "A tech sponsor, big name. He's coming to tour the school around lunchtime. Please be respectful and stay professional." Jalaiah didn't care. Guests came and went all the time, usually men in suits with shiny watches and fake smiles. She kept her apron on and continued stirring the pasta sauce for the kids' lunch. The rest of the kitchen staff buzzed with curiosity. She kept her head down. But when the limo pulled into the parking lot, when the cameras started flashing, when the tall man stepped out in a tailored black coat and shook the principal's hand, Jalaiah dropped the spoon. Her throat closed, because that wasn't just any tech sponsor. That was Silas Wexley. She ducked behind the kitchen door. Her hands shook. He was older, sharper, more polished, the same commanding presence, the same expensive haircut. But he looked tired, worn down. She didn't want him to see her. Not like this, not in an apron and hairnet covered in sauce. But fate didn't ask for permission, because at that exact moment, Cairo ran down the hallway, chasing a classmate who had taken his library book. He turned a corner too fast and nearly crashed into Silas. Silas bent down instinctively, catching him by the shoulders. "You okay, kid?" Cairo froze. So did Silas. Their eyes met, hazel to hazel. And for the first time in his life, Silas Wexley saw his son. Silas didn't move. Neither did the boy. In that split second, the air between them shifted. A subtle tension settled. One Jalaiah had felt the moment her son was born. And now, Silas Wexley stood face to face with the quiet truth he never asked for, never searched for, and never deserved to stumble into. The hallway buzzed with students racing past. Teachers chatted near lockers. But Silas only saw one thing: those hazel eyes. His eyes, set in a smaller face with warmer skin, softer features, and confusion flickering across a young boy's brow. Cairo tilted his head, unsure. He'd only seen the man on news covers, in tech videos, and in the newspaper clippings that lined the office at school. He recognized the face, but not in any personal way. "Sorry," Cairo muttered, stepping back. Silas let go of his shoulders slowly. "No harm done," he said, voice rougher than expected. But he didn't turn away. He couldn't. The boy's eyes, they weren't just similar, they were identical. Cairo turned to run back toward his classroom, unaware of the storm he'd just stirred. Silas stayed frozen, eyes narrowed, chest suddenly tight. It wasn't possible, or at least, it shouldn't have been. But deep down, in a part of him that had never completely gone silent, he knew. In the kitchen, Jalaiah braced herself against the counter. She'd seen it. Every second of it, through the narrow window in the swinging door. Cairo, Silas, the recognition. No words were exchanged, but none were needed. She stepped back from the door, took a deep breath, and tried not to panic. Her hands found the edge of the stainless steel sink as the voices around her became muffled noise. Her son had met his father, without warning, without preparation, without her. The timing, the setting, the exposure, it was a nightmare she'd long buried. And Silas? She didn't want to see his face. Not now, not ever if she had her way. But fate didn't care about what she wanted. By the time lunch ended, Silas had done his full tour. He spoke briefly with the principal, gave his polished sound bites, smiled for a few press photos, and handed over a generous check for the school's tech lab. Then he asked where the cafeteria was. Jalaiah was plating the last of the baked mac and cheese when the head cook nudged her. "Someone's asking for you." She turned slowly. There he was, leaning casually against the doorway, hands in his pockets. Same tailored coat, same unreadable face, but his eyes weren't cold anymore. They were searching. Jalaiah wiped her hands with a towel, tossed it on the counter, and walked toward the back exit without saying a word. Jalaiah. His voice stopped her halfway. She turned her head, just enough. He stepped closer. Not too close, but enough. That boy. She didn't let him finish. "Don't say it here," she said, her tone sharp and low. Silas looked around. She was right. The kitchen was still busy. The hallway had ears. This wasn't the time. "I want to talk." "No." "You want answers." "There's a difference. I deserve to know." She turned fully then. "You deserved to know 7 years ago, but you asked me if I was sure. That was your answer." The room fell quiet around them, as if everyone could feel the crack forming between two. People who had once been something, now standing on opposite shores of a broken bridge. "I didn't know," he murmured. She held his gaze. "You didn't want to know." Silas left the school that day without pressing further. But that night, a black SUV pulled up across the street from her apartment building on 71st. It didn't park in front of the door. It didn't honk. It just sat there, engine running, watching, waiting. Jalaiah saw it from the window while washing dishes. Her body tensed, but she didn't panic. She didn't draw the blinds either. She refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her shaken. But he was patient. He didn't leave. Not for an hour. Not for 2. Just sat there, silent. And when she finally turned off the kitchen light, he pulled away. The next morning, she found an envelope at her doorstep. No name, just her address, tucked neatly under the mat. Inside was a card, handwritten. For him, not for me. "Let me talk to you." One time, it was signed with an old initial she hadn't seen in years. S. She stared at the note long after Cairo left for school. Her instinct was to burn it, but her conscience whispered something else. He had seen Cairo, and no matter what had happened between them, Cairo deserved the truth. She didn't have to open the door for Silas. But maybe she had to open one for her son. That afternoon, she texted the number still saved in her phone after all these years. Café de Laura. 4:30. Come alone. No emoji. No name. No softness. Just a time and place. At 4:28, Silas walked through the cafe doors. He looked different. Tired. He wore a dark coat, black slacks, no tie. Casual, but deliberate. The kind of look a man wears when he's trying to not be intimidating. But Silas didn't know how to not take up space. Jalaiah was already there, seated in the corner booth. No makeup. Fitted coat. Her curls pulled into a bun. She didn't stand when he arrived. Just nodded to the seat across from her. He sat down. The server came. They ordered coffee. Nothing else. Then silence. He took the first step. "I didn't know. You didn't ask. I wasn't ready." She let out a soft, bitter laugh. "So I should have waited until you became the man I needed." "No," he said softly. "But I should have become him anyway." There it was. Accountability. Real. Raw. Too late? Maybe. But still, real. They talked. Not about them. About Cairo. What he liked. What made him laugh. What he hated about spelling tests. Silas listened more than he spoke. And when he did speak, it wasn't with power. It was with guilt. "He's mine," he finally said. "Yes," she replied. "But he's mine first." Silas nodded. "Fair." Then, quieter. "Does he know about me?" "No." "Why?" "Because I didn't want him growing up wondering why his father only showed up when the cameras were off." That stung. He didn't deny it. Jalaiah leaned forward. "This isn't about you feeling better. It's about whether you'll do right by him now." "I want to," he said quickly. "I need to." "Then prove it." They set terms. Small steps. Visits at school. No surprises. No press. Cairo wouldn't be told until Jalaiah felt it was safe for his emotions, not Silas's ego. Silas agreed. "I don't want to miss any more of him," he said, voice low. "You missed enough." He nodded again. Jalaiah stood first. "I have to pick him up." Silas didn't ask to come along. Smart man. "Thank you," he said, rising slowly. She met his eyes one more time. "Don't thank me. Thank your son. He's the only reason you're even getting this chance." Silas didn't return the next day, or the day after that. He waited. For once, the man who was used to the world adjusting to his schedule chose to move slowly. And Jalaiah noticed. She appreciated the space. It gave her time to breathe, to think, to gauge Cairo's energy without revealing anything too soon. Her son was sharp. He always had been. One slight change in rhythm, and he'd be asking questions. But the rhythm didn't change, not immediately, until Thursday afternoon. Jalaiah was in the kitchen drying a tray when the teacher walked in. "Hey," she said casually. "You've got a visitor in the back hallway. Said he's here for Cairo's soccer practice. Gave his name as, I know who he is." The teacher paused, reading Jalaiah's face. "Want me to ask him to wait somewhere else?" Jalaiah shook her head. "No, it's fine. He can stay." He cleared it with the principal. "Yep, all formal, real low-key." Of course he did. Silas didn't move without control. Even in apology, he knew how to organize things. Jalaiah didn't rush to meet him. She finished her task, straightened her apron, took a long breath, then stepped out into the corridor. There he was, again, dressed down in jeans and a navy jacket, hands in his pockets, watching the practice through the gym's open doors. He looked calm, but she could tell he was nervous. His foot tapped, his head tilted every time Cairo touched the ball. When Cairo ran across the court to grab his water bottle, Silas almost stepped forward, but stopped himself. Boundaries. He was learning. Jalaiah stood beside him, not too close. "You made it." Silas didn't look at her. His gaze stayed on Cairo. "He's good. He's focused. Fast. Stubborn." Silas cracked a small smile. Did he always like sports? Not at first. He hated noise when he was younger. But soccer helped with that. Helped him let go of control. He gets that from me, doesn't he? Among other things. Silas didn't ask what those other things were. He didn't need to. They stood in silence for a while, side by side, watching the same child they'd made but raised apart. The next week, Silas came again, this time with a small bag of books. Graphic novels, math puzzles, adventure stories. Age-appropriate, gently worn, and carefully chosen. He didn't give them directly to Cairo. He handed them to the teacher, asking if it was okay to donate them to the classroom. Cairo noticed the man with the quiet eyes and nice shoes, but didn't say much. He never had reason to before. But Silas watched every moment like it was gold. He didn't force anything, not a single time. He showed up during recess. He waved, but didn't push. He left before dismissal. Sometimes, he stayed long enough to watch Cairo get picked up from a distance. Jalaiah saw him waiting in that SUV across the street, head tilted, shoulders tight, but she didn't wave. She didn't owe that. Still, she let him linger in Cairo's space, slowly folding himself into their routine. At home, Cairo began asking questions. "Who's that guy?" "He's someone who cares." "Is he your friend?" "No." "Is he your friend?" Cairo pointed at himself. Jalaiah hesitated. "Do you want him to be?" "I don't know. He looks like me." Jalaiah paused. "Does that bother you?" Cairo shrugged. "Makes me think. That's all." "What do you think about?" "I dunno. Just wonder who I got my eyes from." Jalaiah sat beside him on the couch. She tucked his hair behind his ear. "From someone who didn't know how to stay." Cairo looked up at her. "Is he trying now?" "Yes." "Do people like that change?" Jalaiah didn't answer right away. Finally, "Sometimes." The next few weeks brought more of Silas. He started coming with juice boxes and granola bars, not flashy gifts, just small things for the whole team. He asked questions about the class hamster. He stayed for school plays, sat quietly during spelling bees, always at the back, always present but never disruptive. Cairo grew used to him. At first, he didn't speak to Silas directly, but slowly, there were glances, then nods, then one-word answers to "How was practice?" And finally, on a chilly Monday afternoon, Cairo walked up after class and handed him a drawing. It was a sketch of two figures, one taller than the other, a soccer ball between them. Silas knelt down. "You drew this?" "Yeah." "Is this you?" Cairo nodded. "And me?" Cairo nodded again. Silas blinked. "Thank you." Cairo shrugged. "You watch a lot. Thought you might want it." Jalaiah watched from the doorway, holding her breath. Silas didn't hug him, didn't tear up. He just folded the drawing gently, like it was something priceless. "And Cairo?" He smiled. "A real one." Later that night, Jalaiah sat across from Silas in the diner near her building. Cairo was asleep at home with her aunt. "He gave you a piece of himself," she said. "That doesn't happen often. I won't waste it." "You already did." Silas looked down. "I know." They sat with the silence. Not awkward, not hostile. Just real. Silas spoke again. "I bought a place nearby." Jalaiah raised an eyebrow. "Why?" "I want to be here. Not just for appearances, not in a hotel across town. Close. In case he ever needs me." She stared at her cup of tea. "You're making changes." "I see that." "Because of him." She looked up. "Not because of me." Silas didn't flinch. "I failed you." "Yes. I don't want to fail him." Jalaiah's voice was soft, but firm. "Then don't make promises you're not ready to keep." "I'm not making any." "That's a start." By the end of the month, Cairo knew his name. "Silas," he called once after practice. Silas turned, surprised. Cairo jogged over. "You staying for the game tomorrow?" "If you want me to." "I guess," Cairo said, shrugging like it didn't matter. But it did. Silas saw the flicker in his eyes. "I'll be there." "Cool." Cairo walked off. Silas smiled. Jalaiah saw it from the bleachers. It wasn't just a smile. It was hope. That night, Cairo asked Jalaiah, "Is he going to disappear again?" She took a long breath. "I don't think so." "Good. Why?" "'Cause I kinda like when he watches." Jalaiah blinked back tears. She kissed her son's forehead and silently thanked the boy for doing what she never could, letting Silas back in, piece by piece. Have you ever seen a child soften a grown man's heart just by looking at him? Maybe someone you know was raised by one parent. Maybe you were. And maybe, deep down, you've asked the same questions Cairo did. Do people like that change? It reminds us that showing up late is better than never trying. But effort isn't enough. Consistency is what counts. If you believe a child's quiet courage can rewrite a broken story, share this video. Drop a comment if you've seen a parent earn back their place. And if this touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and keep watching. Because sometimes, forgiveness isn't loud. It's a juice box, a drawing, and a boy saying, "You staying?" Jalaiah didn't remember what it felt like to rest. Not just sleep, but rest. The kind that settled in your bones, made you feel safe, made your breath slower. Even now, with Silas easing his way into Cairo's life, that kind of peace still hadn't found her. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't angry. But she wasn't ready to exhale either. Too much history. Too much left unspoken. And too much at stake. It had been a month since Silas started showing up regularly. He was careful, present, respectful. He didn't overstep. Didn't push too hard. He asked questions about Cairo's favorite breakfast. He brought books, games, and once, a science kit that made Cairo light up for 3 days straight. But Silas never asked for overnight visits, never pushed for titles. He played the long game, and Jalaiah watched. She watched him kneel to tie Cairo's cleats before practice. She watched him stay late when Cairo forgot his sweater. She watched him nod through awkward silences, knowing that trust had to be rebuilt. not demanded. Still, watching wasn't easy. It reminded her of everything they could have been, and everything she had to survive without him. Their new rhythm began quietly. He'd drop off Cairo after weekend visits at the park. He'd sometimes bring coffee. They'd talk in short bursts, on the porch, in the kitchen, over the sound of Cairo's sneakers thudding against the hallway. And every now and then, something unspoken would pass between them, a glance that lingered too long, a laugh that softened into silence, a moment when their hands brushed too deliberately at the grocery store. Jalaiah refused to feed into it. She wouldn't confuse parenting with partnership. Silas was a father now, yes, but she wouldn't let old feelings crawl into that space and undo her hard-earned stability. One rainy Friday evening, Silas stayed for dinner. Not planned. Cairo had begged, full of second-grade excitement about his solar system project. "He has to help me paint Saturn," he said, arms flailing, eyes wide. Jalaiah sighed, unsure. But Cairo was bouncing. And Silas. He stood awkwardly near the door, unsure if he should even ask. "I can come back tomorrow." "No," Jalaiah said. "Stay, but wipe your shoes. And you're doing the dishes." Silas grinned. Deal. Dinner was loud. Cairo talked non-stop about school, the stars, how his classmate called Pluto a punk planet. Silas listened, genuinely. He asked questions, took bites between comments, laughed out loud when Cairo said Jupiter looked like a dirty soccer ball. Jalaiah cooked without fuss, fried plantains, grilled chicken, buttered corn and rice. It wasn't fancy, but it was home, and for the first time, Silas felt it. Not a mansion, not a penthouse, but home. After dinner, Cairo pulled Silas to the floor and spread out the art supplies. Jalaiah stood at the sink, washing dishes slowly. She could hear them behind her, Cairo giving orders, Silas messing up paint lines, both of them laughing. The sound dug into her chest in the softest way. Not pain, not joy, something in between, longing maybe, or fear of getting used to something that could still fall apart. When the project was done and Cairo was finally asleep, Silas lingered at the door. It had become a pattern, him standing there, holding the knob, waiting. Sometimes he said, "Thanks." Sometimes he said good night. Tonight, he said neither. He just turned to her, slow. "You're doing a great job." Jalaiah didn't look up right away. She wiped the counter. "Thanks. I mean it." "I know." She set the cloth down and met his gaze. Parenting isn't about doing it perfectly. It's about showing up. He needed that. "So, I did it." Silas nodded. "I'm trying now. I see that. Do you think I'm too late?" Jalaiah sighed. "For you and Cairo?" "No, he's still young. He's open, curious, willing. And for us?" The question hit the air like thunder. Heavy, uninvited, real. Jalaiah didn't flinch. "For us, I haven't decided." Silas nodded. He didn't push. She respected that. He stepped back, hand on the doorknob again. "Good night, Jalaiah." She watched him, not with romance in her eyes, not with resentment either, just clear, quiet boundaries. "Good night, Silas." The next morning, Cairo woke up early. She found him at the kitchen table, already painting. "What are you doing, baby?" He looked up, face streaked with orange paint. "I'm making a new sun. Daddy says it's the center." Jalaiah's breath caught. He had said it. Daddy. Not that man. Not Silas. But Daddy. A word that had never left his mouth in her presence. She smiled, slow, walked over, kissed his forehead. "I like your son." That afternoon, she sent Silas a photo. Cairo's paint-covered hands. A sloppy yellow circle on paper. He said the sun is the center. "I think he means you're showing up." Silas replied seconds later. "He's the only center I want." Jalaiah read the message twice, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to smile and mean it. The apartment was quiet by 9 p.m., the kind of stillness that settled over a place once dinner had been cleaned. Up, Homework completed, and small feet finally stopped padding the hallway. Jalaya sat in the living room with a mug of warm tea. She stared out the window without focusing on anything. Her phone lay face down on the coffee table. No calls, no texts, no noise. She liked the quiet. It was earned. And for once, it wasn't heavy. Cairo had finally started calling Silas Dad. Not every day, not in front of everyone, but the word had landed. And when it did, Silas's eyes softened in a way that Jalaya hadn't seen before. Almost like he'd been holding his breath for 7 years and was only now letting it out. Around 10:30, she heard it. A small whimper, then a muffled sob. She set the mug down, stood, and followed the sound to Cairo's bedroom. The door was cracked open. A sliver of moonlight fell across the carpet. Inside, he tossed in bed, tangled in the sheets, clutching his pillow too tight. "Baby," she whispered, pushing the door open. His eyes were squeezed shut. Sweat beaded along his hairline. His legs kicked weakly under the blanket. "No, don't go." She rushed to the edge of the bed and knelt. "It's okay. I'm here." Cairo stirred awake with a start, gasping, sitting up fast. His breathing was shallow, eyes wide with fear. "Mummy, right here." She wrapped her arms around him and pulled him to her chest. His small hands fisted her shirt. "It was a dream," he mumbled. "You left. And Dad, he didn't come." Jalaya tightened her arms around him, rubbing circles into his back. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." He clung to her tighter. "Promise?" "I promise." What she didn't know, what she couldn't have seen, was that Silas had just pulled up outside the building minutes earlier. He had forgotten Cairo's space-themed water bottle in his car and came to drop it off before heading back to his new apartment just down the block. He hadn't wanted to disturb them, but something pulled him to the door anyway. He knocked softly. No answer. Then he heard it, a cry faint through the hallway. The door had been left slightly ajar. Instinct kicked in. He stepped in, quietly. The apartment smelled like lavender and dish soap. He followed the sound to Cairo's room and stopped in the hallway. Jalaya was sitting on the edge of the bed, holding Cairo like the world depended on it. Her voice was soft, her fingers careful. "There's no dream strong enough to take me from you," she said. Cairo's sobs slowed. His breath evened out. "I was scared," he said. "I know. But even if I leave a room, I don't leave you. Never. You promise?" "I'd bet my whole life on it." Silas couldn't move. His throat closed. Because in that moment, he saw everything he hadn't been. Everything Jalaya had to become. Everything she had done for the boy they made while he was chasing titles and headlines. She hadn't raised a child. She'd rescued one, and she'd done it with gentleness that never asked for recognition. Silas stepped back slowly, careful not to let the floor creak. He set the water bottle on the kitchen table, wrote a note with the pen beside the fruit bowl. "For the brave one. Sleep easy, champ. Dad," and then he left. Back in the bedroom, Cairo was finally drifting. His grip loosened, his breathing slowed, but Jalaya stayed there, sitting quietly, brushing his curls from his forehead. Her fingers moved gently, like a ritual she'd done 1,000 nights in a row. She remembered the first time Cairo had cried as a baby, how he'd screamed for hours, how she'd held him, barefoot in a too-small apartment, humming gospel tunes just to keep herself from crying with him. That night, she'd promised him something. "I will never let you feel abandoned." And now, even though things had changed, Silas present, the air lighter, the world less cruel, her promise hadn't. She tucked the blanket around Cairo's shoulders and pressed a kiss to his cheek. "I love you," she whispered. He didn't stir, but his mouth moved slightly. Just one word in his sleep. "Mummy." Jalaya stepped out of the room, heart full. She walked into the kitchen and saw the bottle on the table. And the note. Her fingers trembled as she picked it up. She read the message twice. "For the brave one. Sleep easy, champ. Dad." It was small, simple, but it broke something open in her chest. Not pain, not regret. Just softness, a softness she hadn't let herself feel in years. She folded the note gently and placed it in the drawer with the loose batteries and coupons. She didn't text Silas, didn't call, but the next morning she let Cairo take the bottle to school. He held it like treasure, and when Jalaiah kissed his forehead goodbye at drop-off, he said, "I think Daddy's staying this time." She blinked, held his chin in her hand. "And how does that make you feel?" Cairo shrugged, "Like I don't have to protect myself all the time." That afternoon, when Silas showed up at school to walk Cairo home, Jalaiah didn't wait inside the building. She stepped out front, met him by the gate. Their eyes met. He didn't speak. She handed him a second water bottle. "This one's for you." Silas smiled. "What's in it?" "Grace," she said, then turned and walked away, Cairo running ahead. And Silas? He stood there, still, but something in him shifted, because for the first time he felt chosen, not by charm, not by wealth, not by control, but by effort. And effort, he was learning, was the only thing Jalaiah respected. The first time Jalaiah saw the letter, it was by accident. It was a quiet Sunday. Cairo was at a sleepover with his best friend. The apartment was still. Silas had stopped by earlier to drop off a new set of educational puzzles, then asked if she wanted to have dinner. Nothing fancy, just takeout and some downtime. Jalaiah said yes. It wasn't a date. At least, she told herself that. They ate on the couch, laughed, watched Cairo's favorite cartoon, just to see what the hype was about. It was easy, comfortable. After dinner, Silas offered to walk her home, but she wanted to see where he lived now. The apartment he claimed was modest and low profile. So she went. His new place was on the top floor of a renovated 3-story building. Quiet neighborhood, neutral colors, hardwood floors, minimalist furniture, nothing flashy, but everything intentional. It wasn't the kind of place Silas Wexley used to call home. She noticed that. The old him lived in glass towers. This version? He'd planted roots. While he made tea in the kitchen, she wandered, just a few steps. She stopped at the doorway of a small room, his study. Bookshelves, a wide desk, framed photos, and a drawer left slightly open. She didn't mean to look, but something caught her eye. Her name, typed, bold, on a printed page. She stepped closer. It wasn't a letter. It was a report. Wexley Enterprises Legal Counsel Memo Subject, Employee Contract Adjustment. Confidential Paternity Risk Assessment. Name, Jalaiah Monroe. Her blood turned cold. She reached for the sheet and skimmed it quickly. Legal dates. Contract renewal dates. Performance evaluations. And then, if a potential legal claim arises due to personal involvement with Ms. Monroe, offer immediate non-disclosure settlement, minimize exposure, avoid family court proceedings. She dropped the paper like it burned her. Heart pounding. This wasn't recent. The date was 7 years ago, right after she told him she was pregnant. Silas returned a moment later, 2 mugs in hand. She didn't speak, just held up the paper, her fingers shaking. His smile fell. "Where did you—" It was open. He took a step closer. "I didn't. This is why you asked me if the baby was yours." He looked stricken. "Jalaiah, you had your lawyers draft a contingency plan before you even asked me if I was sure." He placed the mugs down on the table slowly, voice low. "I was scared. You were powerful. I didn't know how else to handle it. You hired people to handle me?" Silas flinched. "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it, Silas? Damage control, risk mitigation, PR management?" She backed away, the letter still in her hand. "You knew what we had. You knew I wasn't using you. I know that, now. No. You always knew. You just didn't care." Silence filled the space between them. Thick, bitter. Jalaiah blinked hard, the sting in her eyes threatening to spill. She refused to cry here, in this room, in front of him. She folded the paper in half, slowly, and held it out to him. He didn't take it. She dropped it on the floor, then grabbed her coat and walked to the door. Silas followed. Jalaiah, I was never your equal, was I? His mouth opened. Nothing came out. That's what this was, she said. You didn't fall for me. You calculated me. She opened the door. I would have respected the silence more than this. She didn't slam the door. Didn't scream. Didn't throw anything. She left the way she came into his world, quietly, with grace. That night, she sat at her kitchen table in the dark. Cairo's drawings hung on the fridge. His backpack was on the chair. His soccer ball was by the door, and her heart was on the floor. She had allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, Silas had changed, that he had returned for the right reasons. But what if he never stopped seeing her as the maid? What if everything, from the small apartment to the soccer games, was just another strategy? Not love, just control. She couldn't tell Cairo, not yet. He had just started trusting the man, started sleeping through the night without fear of someone disappearing again. She couldn't destroy that. So she sat there, in the dark, and reminded herself who she was before Silas ever came back. A woman who survived silence, a mother who raised a king, a soul that couldn't be bought or buried. The next morning, she didn't answer Silas's calls, didn't open his texts, didn't respond to the flowers he sent to the school. She wasn't ready to talk, and she didn't owe him anything. But that afternoon, as she picked up Cairo, he ran to her with something in his hand. A folded page, from a notepad. Daddy told me to give this to you. He said not to read it until you got home. She stared at it, didn't move. Cairo tilted his head. Are you mad at him? She crouched down. Sometimes grown-ups get hurt by things they didn't expect. He nodded, but he still came today. She forced a small smile. I know. At home, when Cairo had fallen asleep, she sat on her bed and opened the note. Jalaiah, I don't have the words to undo the file you read, and I won't make excuses, but I want to tell you the truth. 7 years ago, I was a coward in a suit. I let fear write my decisions. I let power speak louder than my heart. I let people I barely trusted plan for a child I should have been fighting for. I didn't know how to be vulnerable back then. You did. You gave me love, and I responded with legal options. I will regret that for the rest of my life. But today, I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to earn your trust, not with flowers or words, but with consistency. I'm not the man I was. I want to be the man your son already believes I am. And I want to be someone you never have to hide from again. If you ever want to talk, I'll be here, not watching from a distance, not controlling from a boardroom. Just here. Silas. Jalaiah sat there for a long time. The letter crumpled slightly in her hand. She didn't cry, but for the first time in 2 days, her breath came easy. She didn't forgive him. Not yet, but she believed him. And that was the beginning of something. Jalaiah hadn't planned to see Silas again so soon. But fate wasn't asking her. The school had scheduled a parent-teacher open house, required attendance, 2 hours of walking through Cairo's classroom, reviewing his progress, hearing from his teachers. Cairo wanted both of them there. He had asked with such gentle hope in his voice, she couldn't say no. So she arrived at 5:45, wearing jeans, a soft sweater, and the kind of composure she'd perfected over the years. Silas was already inside, and he looked like he'd been waiting. She walked past him at first, greeting Cairo's teacher, glancing at the artwork on the wall, nodding politely to other parents. Silas didn't speak. He followed her lead, let her set the pace. It wasn't until Cairo dragged them both into the reading corner, eager to show off the books he'd mastered, that the silence finally broke. Silas crouched beside his son, listening to him read a page out loud, his smile patient, warm, present. When Cairo wandered off to his friend's desk, Jalaiah finally spoke. You wrote that letter yourself? He nodded. I meant every word. You had it typed? No. I wrote it at 3 in the morning. I rewrote it twice. She looked at him, steady. You could have just said it. You didn't want to hear from me. She didn't deny it. You said you're not the same man, she said. I'm not. Then tell me this. She folded her arms across her chest. Back then, was I part of a rescue plan or a checklist? Silas blinked, caught off guard. A checklist? I saw what was in that file. Risk reports, exposure management, legal mitigation. I was a liability. Was I part of a heart decision or a brand strategy? His jaw tensed. I didn't see it like that. You didn't have to. The paper saw it for you. Silas stepped closer, voice low. You weren't a risk. You were my first truth. She stared. Then why did you let lawyers handle it? Because I was afraid to feel like a man who didn't have control. You were the first person who made me question that control. You mean, you couldn't control me? He exhaled. Yes. The honesty hit her like a soft punch. No spin, no defense, just truth. And truth, when spoken without ego, had weight. She turned away, her fingers tightening over her purse strap. Cairo deserves better than the man who wrote that report. I agree. Her eyes snapped back to his. You do? I read that report last year, found it in an old drive. I almost deleted it, but I kept it, to remind myself what not to become again. Jalaiah blinked. And what are you now? He looked toward Cairo, who was now showing his artwork to his friend's dad. A man who finally knows that real strength isn't control, Silas said. It's presence. It's showing up even when you've failed. She didn't say anything, but she didn't walk away either. They stood in silence for several seconds. Then she spoke, softer now. You hurt me. I know. You made me raise a child with dignity while you built empires. I can never make up for that. You're not supposed to. You're supposed to do better now. I will. You can't promise that. No. But I can live it. The final bell rang, signaling the end of the open house. Parents filtered out slowly. Cairo ran up, his backpack swinging. Mom, Dad, did you see my volcano drawing? They both nodded, smiling. You did amazing, Silas said, ruffling his hair. Cairo beamed. Can I ride home with you today? He asked Silas. Jalaiah hesitated. Silas looked at her, waiting for a signal. She gave a slow nod. Yes. But bring him straight home, always. That night, Jalaiah sat alone again, only this time, the silence didn't feel like punishment. It felt like breath. Like maybe the next chapter wasn't about erasing the past, but rewriting the present. She heard keys at the door. Cairo's voice filled the apartment first. Mom, I got fries. Then Silas's. I told him he couldn't have too many. Jalaiah smirked from the kitchen. He played you. Don't worry. I've got carrots waiting. Cairo groaned. Silas laughed. It was real. It was warm. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. Later, after Cairo went to bed, Silas lingered by the door again. It had become his routine. Thank you, he said. For what? For giving me a chance to be better. Jalaiah looked up at him. She didn't smile, but she didn't close the door either. You're still on probation. I'll earn it. He turned to leave. Silas? He looked back. Next time you want to be honest, just say it to my face. I will. Good. And then she did something that surprised them both. She stepped forward, pressed a soft kiss to his cheek. Not a romantic invitation, but acknowledgement, recognition of effort. He didn't move, just closed his eyes. When she stepped back, she whispered, "Good night, Silas." He smiled. "Good night, Jalaiah." Jalaiah hadn't planned on dressing up. It was a third-grade science fair, not an investor's gala. But something about the way Cairo had said, "I hope you both come," like he'd been practicing it in his head, made her pause. She picked the soft blue blouse, clean jeans, modest earrings, hair slicked back and curled at the ends. Not loud, not flashy. Just present. Because today wasn't about her. It was about the boy who once held her finger in a delivery room and now stood, tall behind a trifold board titled, "Why the Sun Doesn't Take Days Off." The gym was full. Kids running around in lab coats made from cut-up t-shirts. Parents clustered in circles, juggling coffee cups and compliments. Jalaya stood by the wall near the entrance, scanning. She spotted Cairo quickly, but before she could call to him, Silas appeared on the other side of the room. He looked different. No suit, just a navy sweater, slacks and sneakers, hands in his pockets, hair slightly tousled like he'd rushed out of the house. His eyes found hers instantly, and instead of waving or gesturing, he simply mouthed, "You look beautiful." Jalaya's heart didn't race. It settled, not from the words, but from the way he said them, with no agenda, no expectation, no performance, just truth. She nodded once, barely a smile, then turned her gaze back to Cairo. When Cairo saw them both, his whole body lit up. "Mum, Dad, look." He gestured to his project with both hands like he was unveiling a national monument. Silas made his way over first. "Wow, is this all you?" "Except the glitter. That was Auntie Lorraine's idea." Jalaya chuckled. "Of course it was." Silas crouched to read the text glued under each photo. "You wrote this by hand?" he asked. "I tried typing it, but it looked too boring." Silas grinned. "It's better this way." Cairo beamed. Jalaya stood beside them, arms folded, heart full. For the first time in public, they looked like a family. No whispers, no shame, no hiding in the shadows of Silas's world. Parents passed by. Some smiled politely. A few did double takes. One whispered something to another, probably recognizing Silas Wexley, but he didn't notice. Or if he did, he didn't care. He was too busy asking Cairo questions about solar flares and laughing at his son's over-the-top impersonation of Earth spinning. "Did you know the sun is so big, 1,000,000 Earths can fit inside it?" Cairo said, puffing out his chest like a professor. "Is that right?" Silas played along. "Yeah, and it never takes a break. If it did, we'd all freeze." Boom. Popsicles. Jalaya smiled, placing a hand on Cairo's back. "You did amazing, baby. I wanted both of you to see it." Her heart clenched. Silas caught her eyes, and in that look, she knew he felt the same. After the fair, they sat on a bench outside the school while Cairo played on the grass with friends. The air was crisp, the kind of early spring chill that made you tuck your hands in your coat pockets. Silas leaned back, legs stretched out. "I haven't felt this proud since, I don't know when." Jalaya exhaled. He was waiting for this. "For both of us." Silas nodded slowly. "You gave him everything. We gave him today." Silas turned to her. "Do you ever regret not telling him about me earlier?" She thought for a moment. "No." "Why?" "Because he would have spent years wondering why you didn't stay." Silas's face dropped. Quiet. Heavy. "I deserved that. It's not about punishment. It's about protection." He nodded. "I'm trying to earn back that protection. For both of you, you can't earn something that was freely given before. You can only respect it now." Silas didn't speak for a moment. Then, "I respect you more than I ever did." Jalaya turned her head. "I know." They sat like that for a while. No forced conversation, no hidden expectations. Just space. Shared, not stolen. That evening, Cairo asked if they could eat dinner together. "All three of us," he said, already setting 3 plates. Jalaya didn't hesitate. Silas ordered takeout from the Nigerian restaurant Cairo loved. Jollof rice, grilled suya, fried plantains. They ate at the kitchen table. No tension, no pretense. Cairo talked non-stop about his science fair, his soccer tryouts, how he wanted to be a NASA chef because even astronauts need good food. Silas laughed so hard he nearly choked on a piece of suya. Jalaya smiled quietly, sipping from her glass of water, watching the 2 people who made her world bigger than she ever imagined. After dinner, she washed the dishes, while Silas helped Cairo with his pajamas. A few minutes later, she heard them from the bedroom. Silas's voice reading aloud, and even though the stars seemed far away, the little boy knew he was made of the same light. Cairo yawned. "I like that part." "I do too," Silas whispered. By the time Silas stepped back into the living room, Jalaiah was folding a dish towel. He paused by the door again, hand resting on the knob. It was routine now. Comfortable. I don't want to overstay. You didn't. I still think about that file. She looked at him. I still think about what I lost. You didn't lose everything. No. But I almost did. Jalaiah stepped closer. For what it's worth, I'm glad Cairo finally saw the version of you I used to believe in. Silas's voice dropped. Do you believe in him now? She held his eyes. I'm starting to. He nodded slowly, then turned, opened the door, and stopped. I'll see you both tomorrow. You know where we'll be. As the door closed gently behind him, Jalaiah leaned against the frame and exhaled, not in defeat, but in quiet rebuilding. Some comebacks don't need applause, just presence. And for the first time it felt like Silas wasn't just coming back. He was becoming. Jalaiah had finally reached something close to peace. She didn't say it out loud. She didn't want to jinx it. But mornings weren't heavy anymore. Cairo smiled more. Silas kept showing up, not just as a visitor, but as a presence. His presence didn't feel invasive anymore. It felt steady. They had a rhythm now, until the knock came. It was Wednesday afternoon. Jalaiah had just gotten home from work and was prepping dinner. Onions, sizzling, tomatoes chopped, music playing softly in the background. Cairo was on the couch, coloring while watching cartoons. Then came the knock. It was soft, measured, not urgent, not angry, but off rhythm. She wiped her hands, walked to the door, and opened it without checking the peephole. The woman on the other side wore a crisp blazer, held a leather-bound folder, and smiled like she'd practiced it 1,000 times. Ms. Monroe? Yes? My name is Melinda Carr. I'm a features reporter with the Daily Echo. Mind if I have a few minutes of your time? Jalaiah's blood chilled instantly. No. The smile didn't falter. It's about Mr. Silas Wexley. I believe you. I said no. Jalaiah began to close the door, but the woman gently placed her hand on the frame, not forcing it open, just holding space. I promise this isn't a scandal. Actually, quite the opposite. A piece on redemption. On fathers stepping into the light. Jalaiah's jaw tensed. I don't need your piece. Public interest in Mr. Wexley has grown since his re-emergence. His re-emergence has nothing to do with me. We believe it does. Your story. Jalaiah pushed the door shut. Harder this time. Click. Lock. She leaned against it, chest rising and falling. The smell of onions filled the air again. Cairo called out from the living room. Mom, everything okay? Yeah, baby. Just a sales lady. Dinner burned. Cairo didn't notice. He ate anyway. But Jalaiah barely touched her food. Her mind raced. How did they find me? She'd never gone public. No photos. No social media mention of Silas. She never even used his name outside conversations with her aunt. But someone had said something. Somewhere. And now the spotlight was knocking on her door. She didn't call Silas that night. She needed time. Space. But the next morning, he was waiting outside Cairo's school. Early. She saw him from the corner of her eye as she walked her son to the gate. He approached slowly. Can we talk? Cairo ran ahead, waving to a classmate. Jalaiah folded her arms. Did you tell anyone about us? No. Did you leak something? Never. Then why is a reporter at my door? Silas blinked. What? A journalist. Said she wanted to do a piece on you. On fathers stepping into the light. His jaw tightened. I didn't approve anything. I swear. She believed him. But she didn't relax. Someone's watching, Silas. He nodded slowly. I'll take care of it. That's not good enough. What do you want me to do? Tell me the truth. Do you really think we can live like this without being found? He looked pained. I was hoping we had more time. There's never enough time when you live in glass houses. He exhaled. Let me talk to my team. I'll shut it down. And if you can't, Silas met her eyes. Then I'll choose you over whatever they want me to say. He didn't wait for permission. He just walked away, calling someone before he even made it back to the car. Jalaya spent the rest of the day on edge. At work, her manager asked if she was okay. She nodded, forced a smile, and kept chopping. By the time she got home, there were no reporters outside. No strange cars, no clicks of cameras, just quiet. But the fear didn't leave, because the world had touched her door once, and it never came, only once. At 8 p.m., Silas texted, "It's handled. They pulled the feature. She won't be back." She didn't reply. At 8:12, he texted again. "I told them no comment. I told them if they printed anything about you or Cairo, I'd pull every dollar from their ad fund." At 8:15, and I meant it. She sat on the couch, the phone in her lap. Cairo was asleep in the next room, and for the first time, the idea of trusting Silas felt less like a leap, and more like a test of her own walls. She picked up the phone and dialed. He answered on the first ring. "You didn't have to threaten them." "Yes, I did. They could have spun it, made us look like a scandal. I wouldn't let that happen. What if it gets worse? Then we face it. Together." Jalaya exhaled into the silence, then asked the question she hadn't said out loud. "Silas, are we safe?" The line was quiet. Then, "I won't lie to you. I want the truth. There's always going to be interest in me. I can't erase that, but I can protect you. Cairo, I can give this story no oxygen, no quotes, no photos, no engagement, and if they dig anyway, then I give them nothing to find." She leaned her head back against the couch, staring at the ceiling. "You say it like it's simple. It's not. Then why are you so calm?" "Because when I was building empires, I learned how to control storms. And now I'm building something worth protecting." That night, she slept with her bedroom window cracked, listening to the wind. It was the first time in years she didn't feel watched. Not because the world wasn't looking, but because someone stood in front of it. Saturday morning, the air in the apartment buzzed with quiet excitement. Jalaya had packed a lunch. Cairo wore his favorite red hoodie. And Silas? He stood in the hallway, pretending not to be nervous, while tying his shoes for the second time. "Are you ready?" Jalaya asked, checking Cairo's backpack again. Cairo bounced. "Let's go. You promised the dinosaur room." Silas chuckled. Can't break a promise to a paleontologist in training. They were headed to the city museum. It had been Silas's idea, a public outing, something fun, something normal. Jalaya hadn't said yes right away. She worried about cameras, questions, the quiet stares. But Silas had made arrangements, a weekday private tour, no press, no crowds, just them. Still, this was the first time they'd be out together. As a trio, it felt big. The ride downtown was surprisingly peaceful. Cairo asked questions the entire way. "Do you think T-Rexes were good dads?" Silas smirked. "Hard to say. They didn't exactly keep photo albums." Jalaya laughed. Silas leaned in. "But I bet you'd make a better dinosaur dad than most." Cairo beamed. Jalaya glanced at Silas. That one small comment, it did something, made her chest warm. She turned her head before he could notice. The museum was quiet. A private staff member, Marcus, greeted them and walked them through a side entrance. No cameras, no crowds, just space to breathe. They started in the fossil gallery. Cairo ran from case to case, wide-eyed. Silas followed, asking questions, kneeling beside him, listening. Jalaya hung back at first, watching. This was the first time she'd seen them like this, together, outside their quiet visits. And it looked natural, too natural. It scared her, not because she didn't want it, but because she did. Later, they sat in the small museum cafe. Silas had gone to get juice. Cairo munched on an apple slice, feet swinging under the chair. Then he looked up at her. "Mom?" "Yes, baby." He lowered his voice. "Is Mr. Silas my dad?" Her heart stopped. Her first instinct was to smile and say, "Why would you ask that?" But she couldn't lie to Cairo. Not after all this time. She inhaled slowly. Why do you ask? He shrugged. He looks like me, and he knows the stuff I like dinosaurs. And you smile different when he talks. Jalia's throat tightened. Before she could answer, Silas returned with 2 small bottles. Apple or grape, scientist? Cairo pointed to grape. Silas handed it to him and sat down. He noticed the quiet, the stillness, the way Jalia wouldn't quite meet his eyes. Everything in him knew something had shifted. Later that day, while Cairo napped on the car ride back, Silas kept one hand on the wheel and one eye on the road. Did he ask? He finally said. Jalia blinked. What? You're quiet, and Cairo's been looking at me different since lunch. She didn't respond. You don't have to protect me, Jalia. I'm not protecting you. Silas nodded. He deserves the truth. She sighed. He asked. And I didn't answer. Silas's jaw tensed. Because of me? No, because I didn't want to be the one to make him carry that yet. Silas nodded slowly. I can talk to him. If you want. Jalia looked out the window. Not yet. Okay. He's 5. He knows more than I thought, but not enough to understand how adults mess up. I won't say anything until you're ready. She glanced at him. No, until he is. Silas nodded again, and for the first time, she felt like they were co-parents. Real ones, not forced by time or truth, but choosing to handle it together. Back at the apartment, Jalia laid Cairo down on the couch. He didn't stir. His arms were wrapped around the tiny dinosaur plush Silas had bought at the gift shop. She turned to thank Silas, but the words didn't come. Instead, she looked at him, studied his expression. Did you always want to be a dad? Silas blinked at the question. I didn't think I'd be good at it. That's not what I asked. He exhaled. No, I didn't always want to be one. At least, not when I was younger. But I imagined it. When? The first night you told me you were pregnant, I stayed up imagining what he or she would look like, what kind of parent I'd be, but I got scared. That's the truth. You got scared, so you vanished. I got scared, so I froze. Then made every bad decision that let the distance grow. She crossed her arms. You're lucky I didn't raise him to hate you. Silas looked away. I know. Jalia stepped forward, voice soft but firm. I don't want Cairo confused. He deserves consistency. If you're in, you're in. If you're not, I'm in. Fully. Whatever that takes. She didn't nod, didn't smile, but she didn't walk away either. Later that night, after Silas left, she tucked Cairo in again. His eyes fluttered open. Mom. Yes, baby. That man today. He makes my tummy feel calm. Jalia leaned down, kissing his forehead. That's good, baby. She stayed beside his bed for a while, hand gently resting on his back, watching him sleep. In his small face, she saw the man who left, but she also saw something else, the man who stayed. Jalia stood in the kitchen early Sunday morning, barefoot, a mug of warm tea in hand. The sun hadn't fully risen, but she couldn't sleep. Cairo's question still rang in her mind. Is Mr. Silas my dad? He had asked it so casually, with no pain, just curiosity, but it cracked something inside her. She had protected him for years, built a world where questions like that wouldn't come until he was old enough to bear the answers. But children have a way of sensing what adults avoid. Behind her, a soft knock came at the door. She didn't have to ask who it was. She opened it, slowly. Silas stood there. No driver, no assistant. Just him. In sweatpants and a hoodie. No armor. Couldn't sleep either? She asked. Not really. She moved aside, letting him in. He stepped in quietly, glanced toward Cairo's bedroom, then followed her into the kitchen. Coffee? She offered. He shook his head. Tea's fine. She poured him a cup, handed it over. No words. Just quiet understanding. They sat at the table. After a moment, Silas spoke. I think about my father sometimes. Not often. Just when I'm about to make a choice. Jalaiah glanced at him. He didn't raise me. I never even saw his face until I turned 16. What changed at 16? He sent a lawyer with a check and a car. Said he wanted to fund my college dreams. Jalaiah's jaw clenched. That must have felt empty, Silas finished. Like being paid to stay quiet. She nodded slowly. He looked down at his tea. I don't want Cairo to ever feel like that. You're not your father, she said, soft but direct. I know. But I also know how easy it is to become someone you swore you'd never be. They sat in silence again. Silas finally lifted his eyes. Let me help. Jalaiah studied him, not just his face, but his posture, his tone, the way he didn't try to sell her anything. Not money, not dreams, just presence. You want to tell him? She asked. He nodded. Together, she sighed. We can't unring that bell once we do. He already senses it. Yeah, she admitted, voice low. He leaned forward. I want him to hear it from us. With truth, not pressure. Jalaiah's shoulders dropped. After church today, she said finally. We'll take him to the park, someplace open, gentle. Silas nodded. She didn't realize her hand had drifted across the table, until she felt his fingers brush hers. Not a grab, just a soft press, a thank you, a promise. That afternoon, the sun was kind. They found a quiet corner at Liberty Park. Cairo sat in the grass, munching on fruit slices, kicking his shoes off and lining them side by side. Silas and Jalaiah sat nearby, close enough to talk, far enough to let him feel free. Baby, Jalaiah began, can we talk to you? He looked up. Am I in trouble? Silas chuckled. Not even close. Jalaiah smiled. We want to tell you something. About your family. Cairo tilted his head. Okay. Jalaiah looked at Silas. He nodded once, then turned to the boy. You asked your mom something yesterday. About me. Cairo blinked. If you're my dad? Silas nodded slowly. Yes. And I am. Cairo was quiet. Jalaiah waited, heart pounding. The boy picked up his juice box, took a sip, then looked at Silas again. Why didn't you come when I was a baby? Silas took a breath. I made a big mistake. I didn't know how to handle things the right way. I was scared, and I let that fear keep me away. Did you not want me? Silas leaned in. No, I didn't know how to deserve you. Cairo's eyes searched his. Then he nodded once. Okay. Jalaiah blinked. Okay. Cairo shrugged. You're here now. Simple as that. He leaned against Silas's side, and Silas wrapped his arm around him like he'd always known how. Later, as they walked back to the car, Cairo ran ahead to chase a butterfly. Silas stayed back with Jalaiah. You sure that was okay? He asked. She nodded. That was more than okay. He smiled softly. He's incredible. He's everything. Silas paused. So are you? Jalaiah didn't respond, but she didn't walk faster either. She let him stay close, step for step. That night, after Cairo fell asleep, Silas sat on the edge of the sofa, unsure if he should leave or stay a moment longer. Jalaiah returned from Cairo's room, hair tied up, wearing a plain tee and leggings. You want tea? She asked. He smiled. You keep offering that like it's peace. She raised a brow. Maybe it is. They sat again, quiet. You looked happy today, she said. I was happy today. She glanced down. I haven't seen you smile like that since the night I ruined everything. She looked up, startled. Silas didn't flinch. You can say it, Jalaiah. I deserve it. You do. But you're trying. That counts. He tilted his head. I know we're not fixed. I know I don't get a pass. But I want more days like today. Not just for him. She met his gaze. You want them for you? He shook his head. For us. She stood slowly, walked to the window. Silas. He rose too, walked closer. You don't have to say yes, or even maybe. But let me stay in this, wherever we are. She turned to face him. You're asking to stay in limbo? I'm asking to stay where you are, even if it's just a few steps behind. Silas didn't reach for her. He waited. Jalaiah looked at him. Really looked. He wasn't the same man who left her shaking and pregnant. He was changed. Maybe not perfect. Maybe not always right. But changed. She walked past him. Then stopped. Turned. Stay for tea? He smiled. And stayed. If this moment stirred something in you, if you felt the weight of Silas's redemption or the quiet grace of Jalaiah's strength, don't just scroll away. Tap like if you believe every child deserves truth and every heart deserves healing. Drop a comment. Do you think Jalaiah should give Silas another chance? Or is trust once broken, never whole again? Share this story with someone who believes in second chances and quiet resilience. And if you haven't yet, subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories, where every story comes with a lesson, a turning point, and a heartbeat. We're building a community of listeners who feel deeply, think critically, and know that love, when earned, is the most powerful kind of redemption. Bronzeville was quiet that Sunday morning. The sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk as Jalaiah walked Cairo to the community center. He had a chess match that morning, his first real tournament, and he was nervous. Chewing the corner of his jacket sleeve like he always did when overthinking. You'll do great, Jalaiah said, tightening his scarf. You've practiced with Silas, and I've seen you beat him 3 times in a row. Yeah, but he lets me win sometimes, Cairo whispered, glancing down. She knelt to meet his eyes. Your dad's a lot of things, baby, but he's not good at faking losing. Cairo giggled. His dimples showed, the ones he got from Silas. She kissed his forehead and walked him inside, staying long enough to watch. Him settle into his chair across from a kid with glasses and spiky hair. Jalaiah stepped back. She didn't hover. She never wanted to be that kind of mom. When she turned around, Silas was already leaning on the doorway. Hoodie, jeans, the same quiet, attentive expression he wore the first time he saw Cairo play. I didn't know you were coming, she said. I was already nearby, he replied, but she knew that wasn't true. He made a habit of being where Cairo was now. Thanks for the books you dropped off, she said. He's been sleeping with the chess tactics one, like it's a teddy bear. Silas smiled. He's got potential. Jalaiah crossed her arms. So do you. Silas's gaze sharpened. You mean, as a father? As a man, she answered. But that depends on what you do with it. He swallowed and looked at the sidewalk. I'm trying. She nodded slowly. Trying isn't everything, but it's something. They stood there quietly. Inside, the match had begun. Jalaiah could hear the soft clack of pieces moving, the occasional shuffle of sneakers under the tables. Silas broke the silence. My mom called. Jalaiah didn't react at first, and she saw the press conference and the article in the Post. She wasn't exactly thrilled. I didn't expect her to be, Jalaiah said. She never liked me. She never knew you. Jalaiah raised a brow. She made it clear I was beneath the Wexley name. Silas shifted. I was a coward back then. I let her opinions control too much. I see that now. That makes one of us who's grown, Jalaiah said. Not harshly, but honestly. He looked up. I want her to meet Cairo. Properly. Jalaiah blinked. Why? Because she needs to know he's not a mistake, Silas said. That what we had wasn't shameful. That you're not some maid I forgot after a night. Her eyes glinted. But I was. Back then, no, he said softly. You were the only real thing in my life, and I was too blind to see it. Jalaiah didn't melt. She'd heard apologies before, but this one felt earned, raw, not rehearsed. I'll think about it, she said. But if your mother says one sideways word to my son, she won't. She better not. He nodded. Fair. They stood side by side, watching through the glass. Cairo was smiling now, confident, focused. Silas leaned a little closer. He looks like you when he concentrates. No, she replied. He looks like you when he wins. A soft silence settled between them again, but this time it was warmer, less weighted. "Can I take you two out afterward?" he asked. "Lunch. Nothing fancy." She hesitated. "Not a date? Not unless you want it to be." She smiled faintly. "We'll see how Cairo plays. If he wins, he gets to pick. Deal." Inside the building, Cairo moved his queen, leaned back in his chair, and grinned. Checkmate. The restaurant wasn't lavish, just a small, tucked-away diner in South Shore where the waitstaff knew regulars by name and the lemonade was fresh-squeezed. Cairo picked it, said he liked the grilled cheese and the ceiling fans looked cool. Jalaiah and Silas sat across from each other in a booth, while Cairo devoured fries and explained his final chess move with sound effects. His joy was contagious. Silas listened, eyes wide, as though Cairo were the grandmaster of the universe. After dessert, Cairo asked to use the restroom. Jalaiah gave him the nod, and once he was out of earshot, Silas leaned forward. "Thank you for this." "You don't have to keep thanking me," she said, sipping her water. "I do. Because you didn't have to let me in again. You had every right to shut the door forever." Jalaiah sat back. "I almost did. What changed? You started showing up without excuses, not just for Cairo, but for me." Quietly, respectfully, he looked at her hands. "I missed you. For years I told myself it was better that I stayed away, but I was lying. Because of shame? Because of fear? Of not knowing how to fix what I broke?" Jalaiah's voice softened. "You can't fix everything. But you can be better." "I want to be," he said. "Not to win you back, but to deserve being near you again." She paused. "You don't get a reward for doing what you should have done long ago." "I know," he replied. "But I'm not asking for one." She watched him for a long moment. "So why now, Silas?" He looked down at his hands, then back at her. "Because when I saw Cairo, I saw what I could have lost forever. And I realized I'd been punishing myself more than you ever did." Jalaiah's throat tightened. She'd spent so many nights wondering if he felt anything. If he regretted the way he walked away, how he'd erased her like she never existed. Hearing this didn't erase the past, but it cracked open the truth. "You need to understand something," she said slowly. "Loving me isn't about guilt or redemption. It's about choice." He nodded. "I choose you." "No," she corrected. "You choose to show up, again and again, even when I don't make it easy. That's what matters now." The bathroom door swung open. Cairo returned with damp hands and a proud grin. "I washed my hands extra long," he announced. "Good," Jalaiah said, scooting over so he could slide in beside her. Silas pulled out a folded napkin from his pocket and began sketching a rook and knight. "Want to learn a new endgame trap?" Cairo lit up. "Yes." As they huddled over the napkin, Jalaiah watched them both. For the first time in years, her heart didn't feel like it was holding its breath. When they left the diner, Cairo held both their hands, one on each side, and swung them back and forth. "Are we like a team now?" he asked. Jalaiah glanced at Silas. "We're working on it." Silas smiled down at his son. "Best team I've ever been on." Jalaiah didn't say much after that, but she didn't let go of Silas's hand either. It started with a blurry photo. Just Cairo in his school uniform, stepping out of Silas's SUV. A local reporter posted it under a clickbait headline, "Silas Wexley's Mystery Child. Billionaire caught with lookalike boy." Jalaiah saw it during her lunch break. Her stomach dropped. By the time Cairo got home from school, 3 more articles had surfaced. One suggested Silas had fathered a child out of wedlock with a former employee. Another speculated on Jalaiah's background, calling her a Bronzeville single mother with no known public profile. Silas arrived an hour later. His jaw was tight. His phone buzzed constantly, but he ignored it. "It's spreading. Blogs, Twitter, morning shows." Jalaiah crossed her arms. "You didn't think this would happen? I hoped we'd have time. I didn't want it like this." "Cairo's face is everywhere," she said. "He's a child, not a headline. I'm going to handle it." She gave him a sharp look. By doing what? Sending a cease and desist? Writing a check? This isn't code you can debug, Silas. I'm not trying to fix it with money. He pulled out his phone, scrolled, and held it up to her. I'm calling a press conference. Jalaiah stared. To say what? To tell the truth. That Cairo is my son. That you're the woman I love. That the public has no right to turn your lives into spectacle. Jalaiah shook her head. You can't control what happens after that. Once you speak, they'll dig into me, into my family, into your past. They'll spin stories from thin air and feed them to people who don't care what's real. Silas stepped closer. I care, and I'm tired of hiding. She stared at him. The silence stretched until Cairo peeked from behind the kitchen wall. Why is Mummy mad? He asked softly. Jalaiah sighed, kneeling down to meet his eyes. I'm not mad, baby. We're just trying to protect you. From what? She hesitated. Silas crouched beside her. From people who want to talk about things they don't understand. Like what? Silas looked at Jalaiah for permission. She gave a small nod. Like why I wasn't around when you were little, and why I'm here now. Cairo blinked. But you're here. Yes, and I always will be. Cairo glanced between them. So, are we a family now? Neither of them answered right away. Then Jalaiah took his hand. We're becoming one. The next day, Silas stood in front of a packed room full of reporters. Jalaiah watched from a small TV in the kitchen. Cairo was at school, unaware that his life was being reshaped in front of cameras. Silas didn't wear his usual sleek suit. He looked plain, serious. He walked to the podium, cleared his throat, and looked directly into the lens. There's been speculation about a child seen with me. Let me be clear. His name is Cairo. He is my son, and he is not a secret. He is my joy. A few gasps, a flutter of camera shutters. I made mistakes in the past, he continued. Ones I'll spend the rest of my life making up for. But no one, no blog, no outlet, has the right to violate a child's innocence. A pause. Then, I'm asking the media, the public, and everyone watching, leave my son alone. Let him grow in peace. Let his mother continue the life she built with dignity and grace. Jalaiah's hand trembled. She gripped the counter and watched as he finished. This is my family, not a press story. Respect that. He walked off. No questions, no PR team, just truth. And for once, the room didn't chase after him. They let him go. That night, Silas returned to Jalaiah's apartment. She opened the door before he knocked. You did good, she said softly. I meant every word. Cairo was already asleep. They stood quietly, the weight of the week pressing against them. Want to stay for tea? Jalaiah asked. Silas nodded. Only if I get to wash the mugs. She smiled. It wasn't a solution. But it was a start. The next morning, Jalaiah woke up before the sun. She hadn't slept much. But for the first time in a while, she didn't feel heavy. She padded into the kitchen and started boiling water for tea. Silas had stayed the night, on the couch, by her insistence. He didn't argue. He didn't push. That meant more than anything. When he walked in, his hair tousled and shirt wrinkled, he didn't look like the billionaire the world knew. He looked like a man trying, one step at a time. Good morning, he said. You snore, she replied without looking up. He chuckled. Only when I'm at peace. She turned, finally letting her eyes meet his. Are you? Getting there. They shared a quiet smile. The air between them no longer carried resistance. It was still fragile, but it felt real. Cairo burst into the room moments later, his backpack already slung over one shoulder. Mom, can I show Mr. Silas my science project before school? Jalaiah raised an eyebrow. You mean your dad? Cairo paused. He hadn't called him that yet. Silas waited, not pressing. Cairo shrugged shyly. I guess, yeah, Dad. Silas's chest tightened. I'd love to see it. Cairo rushed to his room and came back with a cardboard model of the solar system. I used foil for the stars, he explained, and the glue kept messing up, but Mom helped fix it. Silas knelt beside him. This is incredible. Did you know Jupiter's the biggest planet? Yeah, I made it the biggest ball. Smart move. Jalaiah leaned against the counter, watching the two of them. Something softened in her. After Cairo left for school, the apartment fell into quiet again. Silas lingered, his hand brushing the back of the couch. I've been thinking. Dangerous, she teased. He didn't smile. I want to buy a place nearby. Jalaiah blinked. What? Not a mansion. Nothing dramatic, just something close. I want to be present, not drop in like some seasonal dad. Silas. I'm not asking to move in. I'm asking for a chance to be consistent. Her guard rose automatically, but she caught herself. He wasn't demanding space in her life. He was asking for proximity to their son, to earn trust the slow way. I'll think about it, she said. That's all I ask. Later that afternoon, Jalaiah picked Cairo up from school. Parents whispered. A few stared longer than necessary. One mother tried to ask, is it true about... Jalaiah cut her off with a polite but firm, have a good day, and kept walking. Cairo didn't seem to notice. He was too busy recounting a playground race. When they got home, a delivery was waiting. A single small box. No flashy branding. Inside was a hardcover book, The Boy Who Lit Up the Sky. A sticky note on the front read, For Cairo. One day, I hope he'll read this and know I saw his light, even when I didn't know where to find it. Dad. Jalaiah held the book for a long moment. Later, she found Cairo flipping through it on the couch, lips moving as he tried to sound out the words. Do you like it? She asked. Yeah, he said without looking up. It's not a baby book. It's like a real one. It is a real one. Did Dad write it? She smiled. No, but he picked it. That counts. Cairo nodded. Can I keep it by my bed? Of course. The next day, Silas returned. Not with gifts, not with noise. Just a book bag of his own and an offer to help with Cairo's homework. Jalaiah watched from the doorway as father and son sat cross-legged on the living room rug, working through math problems. Why does 3 times 4 make 12? Silas leaned in. Think of it like stacking boxes. 3 stacks with 4 boxes in each. Oh, that's 12. Silas grinned. Exactly. Cairo giggled and threw his pencil in the air like a victory dance. It was ordinary. It was perfect. That night, Silas stayed again, on the couch as before. But when Jalaiah handed him a blanket, she paused. Thank you. He looked surprised. For what? For making Cairo feel seen and safe. Silas nodded slowly. He deserves that. So do you. She hesitated. I don't know what this is yet, she admitted. But I'm not afraid of figuring it out anymore. He didn't step closer. He didn't push. He just whispered, Neither am I. She turned off the light, leaving the kitchen in quiet. From the living room, his voice floated out, soft but certain. Good night, Jalaiah. She smiled in the dark. Good night, Silas. They were far from perfect, far from healed, but for the first time in years, the future didn't feel like something to brace for. It felt like something to build. 2 weeks passed with no breaking headlines, no paparazzi outside Jalaiah's apartment, no anonymous letters, no cruel comments under news articles. The world had moved on, finally, and in that quiet space, something real began to grow. One crisp Saturday morning, Silas knocked on Jalaiah's door, holding a single silver key. I want to show you both something, he said. Come with me. She hesitated, but nodded. Cairo ran out of his room, already slipping on his shoes. Are we going somewhere fun? That depends, Silas replied. Do you think having your own room is fun? Cairo's eyes widened. I get my own room? Silas smiled. You tell me when we get there. They drove 10 minutes, still in Bronzeville. Familiar blocks, local stores, no gates, no private driveway. He pulled into a small cul-de-sac and stopped in front of a charming brick townhouse. It had a red door, a tiny porch swing, and a patch of grass in front that looked like it wanted to be a garden. Jalaya stared. This is yours? She asked. Ours, he said carefully. Cairo's, mostly. I closed on it yesterday. She blinked. I thought you'd go back to the penthouse. Or something with a helipad. I've had the penthouse. I've had the flash. But this is where my son lives. I wanted something that matched him. And you. Cairo jumped out of the car. Can I see my room? Silas handed him the key. You're the first one to open the door. Cairo fumbled with the lock, finally swinging the door wide open. The inside was warm. Neutral walls, hardwood floors, a lived-in feel, even though it was brand new. He ran through the space like it was a maze, squealing when he reached a door with a hand-painted sign. Cairo's space station. Inside was a room themed with stars and planets, glow-in-the-dark ceiling stickers, a rocket ship bed, a small telescope by the window, and books. So many books. Jalaya stepped into the room, overwhelmed. You did all this, already? I had help. I've been working on it since the photo leaked. I figured if the world was going to know Cairo, I wanted him to know I wasn't going anywhere. Cairo flopped onto the bed, hugging a pillow shaped like Saturn. Jalaya turned to Silas. You didn't need to do all this. I know. But you did. Because I wanted him to know he's not just part of my life. He's the center of it. She didn't speak. Her eyes roamed the room again. Silas added, There's a room next door too. It's empty. For now. She raised an eyebrow. Trying to fill it. No pressure. I just wanted space for possibilities. Yours, not mine. That touched her more than any of the gifts. They spent the afternoon there. Cairo played on the rug while Silas cooked spaghetti in the small but modern kitchen. Jalaya sat on the porch swing, sipping tea. She looked up when Silas joined her. You didn't even ask if we'd say yes. I didn't need to. I just needed to make the offer. She tilted her head. What changed you? He exhaled. Failure, public shame, regret, and seeing the two of you in my life, without needing anything from me but honesty. Jalaya set her mug down. You're not the man I met 5 years ago. No, he said. But I wish I had been. She looked at him. We needed the journey. He smiled softly. You're right. And I'm not trying to erase the past. I just want to write a better next page. She reached over and rested her hand on his. That simple gesture said more than any vow. Silas squeezed her fingers gently. You still believe in second chances? Jalaya nodded. Always. Inside, Cairo called out, Mom, Dad, I made a spaceship out of pillows. They both laughed, standing slowly. Let's go see, she said. Silas held the door open. After you. And just like that, they walked inside, toward something new. No headlines, no judgment, just home. A week after Jalaya and Cairo's first visit, Silas sent a short message. Dinner. Just us three. No press, no promises, just plates. Jalaya smiled at the text longer than she meant to. That Friday, she and Cairo arrived just before sunset. The house looked warm this time, not because of furniture or lighting, but because of what waited inside. Cairo ran straight to his room. Silas had added more than toys. There were framed art pieces he'd made at school, a hand-painted name sign above the door, a photo of the three of them at the zoo, Cairo sitting on Silas's shoulders. You did all this? Jalaya asked quietly, looking around. Silas nodded from the hallway. I wanted him to know, this is his space too. Dinner was simple. Spaghetti and meatballs. Silas cooked. Cairo talked about school. Jalaya watched them like a dream she wasn't sure she was allowed to have. Later, after Cairo fell asleep on the couch, Jalaya helped Silas carry him to bed. She lingered at the door, watching Silas tuck the blanket up to Cairo's chin. He's changed you, she whispered. Silas looked up. You both have. They walked back to the kitchen. Steam still curled from the kettle. She poured tea while he dried the dishes. I used to think I needed more time, Silas said. More control, more quiet. But this noise is better. Jalaya turned to face him. What noise? The sound of your son laughing in the hallway, the clink of cups in your sink. The sound of someone breathing next to me when I wake up. Her hand trembled slightly as she set her mug down. Silas. I'm not asking you to move in today, he said. I'm not asking you to marry me tomorrow. I just want to build this the right way, at your pace, with your trust. Jalaiah studied him. You're different than the man who walked into that bookstore months ago. I hope so, he said, but I'd rather prove it than promise it. Silas reached into a drawer and pulled out a worn notebook. He flipped to the first page and handed it to her. It was her handwriting, from the night he first visited. The quote she'd scribbled on the receipt when he asked her favorite author, "Real love doesn't need to chase headlines. It just shows up." You kept this? She asked, voice small. I carry it, he said, because it reminds me what matters. Tears welled in her eyes. She wiped them quickly. I never thought this would be our story. Neither did I. But I'm glad it is. Silas stepped closer. So, may I see you tomorrow? No suits, no script, just us? Jalaiah nodded. He kissed her forehead, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like home. If this story moved you even half as much as it moved me while writing it, then don't just scroll away. Tell us, what would you have done in Jalaiah's shoes? Was Silas worth the second chance? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like the video if you believe real love can find its way back. And if you enjoy stories filled with truth, healing, and heart, subscribe to Mr. Charles Stories so you never miss what comes next. Because here, love isn't perfect, but it's honest, and it's worth watching.